resounding success. And so now to thank and acknowledge those folks whose work and dedication made that project a success, a couple of things to call to your attention. Please note the insertion in your handout, which includes some details about the project, everyone who was involved, some beautiful words of tribute to the women in whose honor that hallway has been dedicated. I do want to just make a point of inviting the members of the group that made it possible who are here with us tonight to stand in just a moment when I call your name so that we can see who you are. I'll ask you to not applaud for them, but to give them a big thank you and a mazel tov when you run into them at the oneg. So with us this evening, our service began this evening when Pam Lewis began with the blessing over the candles. Pam, if you would stand up so we can see who you are. Pam was a member of that committee. Also here this evening, Myra Lipper. Myra, I saw you somewhere. Myra. Adam Newar and his family are here. Adam is here representing his late mother, Sheila, whose name is on the wall and whose memory we hold very dear tonight as we dedicate this space in her memory. On the committee was Gary Marks. Gary? Pam is already standing. Myra is already standing. Rabbi Walter is in the other service, so please give him a thank you when you see Rabbi Walter in the oneg. I want to call special attention to the hard, dedicated, long work of Buzz Marvins, who is responsible for restoring those photos, and Dennis Merland, who did the great, loving work of doing the framing of those photographs. It is very important that although we have this handful of dedicated, loving, hardworking people standing in our midst, this project really was a congregational effort and a community effort. Dozens and dozens of people were involved in making contributions to make this project a reality and bring it to fruition. Lastly, I do just want to make a point of acknowledging the importance and the significance of having these major life cycles in the life of our congregation captured and celebrated for future generations to share. This is always the time in our service when we recognize and give thanks for milestone and life cycle events, and this event is no different. So to all of you, thank you for your love, thank you for your hard work, thank you for the dedication and the devotion that went into making this project a success. It is beautiful. We are so thankful, and we can't wait to celebrate with all of you and to say l'chaim after the service. Thank you all. You all may take a seat. And so I want to begin my remarks this evening with, by sharing with you a moment that comes from the ancient past in the history of Jewish law. When many centuries ago, the Jewish sages, whose great legal minds created the framework for Jewish law, found themselves in an unexpected conundrum when they were assembling the legal code that applies to the rules for the mitzvah of placing a mezuzah on one's doorway. And so the question arose to these lawmakers, is there an obligation to put a mezuzah on the doorway that leads to a Jewish library or study hall? And you might be surprised to learn that the rabbis find themselves agonizing at length over this question. There's a much more energetic debate that comes out of this question than almost any other piece on this topic of Jewish law. So they debate back and forth, and eventually the rabbis come to a conclusion, and the answer is no. A study hall, a yeshiva, a beit midrash does not require a mezuzah on the doorpost. Why? Because the study hall is a place filled with Torah. The only reason for the existence of the study hall is to contain the sacred writings of Torah. A place where Jews gather to learn is nothing more than an enormous container designed to enclose the Word of God. And so a mezuzah, which is after all just a very tiny excerpt of Torah, wrapped in a container of its own, that mezuzah hanging on the doorframe is somewhat redundant. There's no need for that little scroll to signify to passers-by that on the other side of that doorway is a place of Torah, if the identity of the place itself is an expression of Torah. So tonight, when we have the chance to celebrate and thank and acknowledge all of those whose vision and generosity and memory contributed to the renovation of our Parkans Administrative Hallway, this moment from the history of Jewish law comes back again to remind us that the things that we hang on our walls, just like the things we affix to our doorposts, are a tangible expression of who we are and of what we value. And as it happens, this is a teaching that's echoed in this week's Torah portion. In this week's Torah portion, we're reminded of the law of mezuzah, and we hear the familiar verses, "Let these words be upon your heart, bind them as a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead. Teach them to your children when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise up, and inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that you and your children may long endure." In the days right after I arrived in Emanu, again and again, some variation on the following encounter would happen to me. Someone would walk up to me, introduce themselves. They'd say, "Nice to meet you, Rabbi. I'm so-and-so. I'm on the wall." And at the time, I had no idea what that meant. My best guess was that someone had recently told that person that they were off the wall, and they wanted to set the record straight. Before long, it didn't take me very long, before long I came to recognize that what they were telling me was that their photograph was among the collection of those hanging on the wall in that hallway. And it wasn't too long after that I came to realize why they took the time to tell me that, and why the walls of that hallway are so important to so many people in this room and in our community. Those walls aren't just another exhibition space for Libby to decorate. The photographs aren't there because we value them as art or as holdings in our archives. They matter because they show that the people in those photographs are a part of this community, and they speak to us about the connection that those faces hold to the values that animate and motivate our community of faith. As you walk down the hall, you can watch the history of our congregation unfold. There's a sensation of movement and growth as the generations flow by like the pictures in a flip book. Classes of religious school students grow and diminish and grow again. You can track dramatic and at times hilarious trends in hairstyles and fashion. The white confirmation robes conceal the flare of bell-bottom pants in the 1970s, and tiny consecration Torahs are gripped proudly in girls' prim white gloves during the 1940s. Familiar faces flick by in an instant, and some of the most beloved faces change slowly from one frame to the next to the next. Personally, I love walking down the hall quickly so I can watch Rabbi Walter's hair turn gray as I walk down, confident in the knowledge that that won't happen to me. But in those photos are captured moments that are precious and fleeting. In them, we see the shy smiles of consecration students. We see the adolescent swagger that can only be truly mastered by confirmation students. And we see the pride that looks exactly the same across generations of rabbis and teachers and parents who we know are grinning expectantly just on the other side of the camera. In all of those pictures, the photographer finds in the viewfinder's frame a swell of pride that comes from the inheritance our students are receiving, the joy and responsibility that comes from taking one's place in the chain of tradition, knowing that they're part of something much bigger than themselves. Just like the room that requires no mezuzah because it is already filled with Torah, I now know that what you wanted me to know when you told me that you were on the wall was that those walls show what we value, and from those values flows the awareness of who we are. Now I know why that was so important to you, and now that my children are on the wall too, I feel that pride in my heart as well. A mezuzah on the doorway to a study hall is redundant because the shelves are stacked with holy books. No one needs a tiny scroll in order to know that they are entering a place of Torah. And in exactly the same way, when we walk down the hall after services tonight, when we see those lovingly retouched and restored photos on the wall, we're reminded succinctly and powerfully about who we are and what is at the core of our community's values. Just like a mezuzah on the door, the eyes and the smiles in those photos, the funky cat-eye glasses and leisure suits and clip-on ties show anyone passing by what matters to our congregation. Those are the words on our hearts and the symbols between our eyes. And we remember what we are taught in this week's Torah portion. We are commanded by the words of the book of Deuteronomy to hang mezuzot for exactly the same reason that we are commanded to teach our children and recite the words of Torah daily. Lema'an yirbu yemechem v'yemei yenechem, so that you and your children may long endure. The Torah's words are not an idle promise. It is a promise that comes true. That's what's hovering behind the smiles of all of the adults in those photographs. The educators who taught, the rabbis who guided lovingly. And it is what motivated so many of you who gave and volunteered to make this renovation project a reality. And it is what we celebrate when we look through those photos to share our stories and our memories. We do these things so that we and our children will long endure. It is that work that makes this place a holy place. And so I want to invite Kathy Marks to the bima. I want to invite Barbara back up to lead us in a musical conclusion to this moment of blessing together. You'll find the words to holy place in the handout you received at the beginning of our service.
These are the gifts that we bring, that we may build a holy place.
This is the spirit that we bring, that we may build a holy place.
We will bring all the goodness that comes from our hearts, and the Spirit of God will dwell within. These are the colors of our dreams we bring to make a holy place. Ooh.
This is the weaving of our lives, that we may make a holy place.
We will bring all the goodness that comes from our hearts. The Spirit of love will dwell within. These are the prayers that we bring, that we may make a holy place.
These are the visions that we seek, that we may build this holy place.
Let our promise forever be strong. May our souls rise together in song, that the Spirit of God,
The spirit of love,
Shekhinah, will dwell within. That the Spirit of God,
and the spirit of love,
Shekhinah, will dwell